Hello everyone, welcome to join our class of essential sentence patterns. In today's class, we're going to introduce you starting a sentence with a hypothesis. This is the fifth part of the class. In our previous class, we have already learned sentences starting with if, sentences starting with I wish that, sentences starting with if only, sentences starting with would that, sentences starting with without, sentences starting with but for, sentences starting with were it not for, sentences starting with had it not been for, and sentences with as if though. In today's class,
Now,
we
in
have
today's
two major
class,
parts
we
of
were
the
going
sentence
to
patterns. The first part is
discuss
called
two
would
major
rather.
topics.
The
The
second
first
part is
topic
called
is
prefer.
related to the sentence patterns starting with the would
And
rather.
among the
The second
would rather, we will
topic is
introduce
related
you
to the sentence
four
patterns starting with
major
prefer.
sentence pattern.
So in
Where
the
the
would
first
rather part,
two
we are going to
sentence
introduce you
patterns
four
are related to
basic sentence
the
patterns.
verbs
The first
containing two
two
subjects.
sentence
The first
patterns
one is
as
as
follows.
two
Related to
subjects
subject
are
one
different.
would rather
More
as
than
to
one
the
subject.
third one
VED.
and
The
the
fourth
third one
means
and
that
the
fourth
first
one
subject
only
related to
one guy
only
or
would
one
rather.
subject.
So
As to
it's
means
the second subject.
simple.
VED is a verb
Is
with
about
the past
to do
tense.
some action.
So for example, we
So
can
the first
say
part
she would rather he stopped
is introduced
working
as
right now,
follows.
where she is the first subject, he is the second subject, and the only verbs with the past tense is stopped, and it follows some phrases after the stop. The second pattern about the would rather is called S1 would rather, S2 had past tense in the finish. So for example, I'd rather you hadn't done it. So in this example, I'd
Where
rather
I is
you
the
hadn't
first
done it,
subject,
where
you
I
are
is
the
the
first
first subject and you
is
the
second
past
subject.
tense. In the
finish
past tense in the
is
finish
where
is
hadn't
the
done.
done part. Note the first
Note
two in our first two
patterns,
sentence
our
patterns subjects are different.
okay, sorry.
Now, what is the third
The third
subject?
sentence patterns and the fourth sentence pattern are relatively simple because they only contain one subject. So let's see the third one. The third one is called as would rather not VR. It's easy, right? So for example, Helen would rather not go home on her own tonight. Here the VR means the verb in its original tense. That is, in this example, S is Helen is the subject and go home is the verb. The fourth sentence pattern
right now,
is
let's
called
see the
would
fourth
rather VR1
sentence
than
pattern.
VR2. S would rather VR1 than VR2. For example, he would rather eat in than eat out. It's obvious, right? So the first verb is eat in, the second verb is eat out, and the only subject is he. Now let's see another major topics of our class is prefer. Actually, the meaning of a prefer and would rather are very similar, so probably you can just replace the first sentences with the second sentences in different pattern, but still keep the same meaning. So in prefer, we are going to introduce you 5 different sentence patterns. The first one is as prefer not to VR. The second one is as prefer MP1 to MP2. The third one is as prefer VING1 to VING2. The fourth one is as prefer to VR1 rather than to VR2. The fifth one is S1 prefer that S2 should VR. So let's see. The first one, as prefer not to VR, it's relatively simple. You can add not to show that the meaning is negative, or just keep it to VR. So which means that the subject would rather to do something the action is leading by the verb. So she prefers him to stop working right now is an example. We already see that she would rather him something something in the previous example. Now we just replace the original pattern with the prefer. So right now we can say she prefers him to stop working right now. The second pattern is S prefer MP1 to MP2. What does this MP1 and MP2 means? Actually, MP1 is the abbreviation of a noun phrases, and MP2 is another abbreviation of noun phrase. So, for example, he preferred life on the farm to that in the capital. The third pattern related to prefer is S prefer VING1, the verb with ing form 1, to the verb with ing form 2. For example, I prefer swimming to skiing, so there's some comparison inside of such a pattern because there are two actions that are compared. Now, the fourth pattern related to S prefer to VRY rather than to VR2. You see, this is very similar to what we have seen related to the verb VING, but it's in 2 plus verb form. So for example, he prefers to eat in rather than to eat out. Now the fifth part is S1 prefers that S2 should do something, and this do something should use the verb in its original form. So for example, her parents prefer that she should stay at home. Okay, now in today's class, we have introduced you 4 different essential sentence patterns starting with would rather, and 5 different essential sentence patterns related to sentences starting with prefer. Do you have any questions? And if you need more exercises or questions, you still have any related to the grammar, we have explained to you. Learn the structure, the grammar part, what can you do, the structure part, dealing with the sentence part of the sentences, or you still have like more exercises, or other I need questions related to the hypothesis. You might still have the challenges in your learning related to the challenges please contact your learning or email us. Please don't hesitate to contact this is today's class, weebly.com. And you are always welcome to join us in our next class. So see you right now. See you later.